Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our 2023 Data Salary Guide launch. So for those of you that don't know, for over a decade, Harnham has been publishing our annual salary guide that provides an in-depth overview of the data landscape in select regions. You'll find information on average salaries for different data roles, as well as hiring, workplace and tech trends, along with expert commentary on how we can drive data progress in data, AI, machine learning. Through a combination of survey responses and internal data, our sister company Rockborne has analysed over 165,000 data points in this year's research. It's important to note that the information presented in this report has been independently collected and analysed. Just like the research endeavour, this research has its limitations. However, it's also worth noting that Harnham's been conducting this survey for over a decade. With over 10 years under our belt, our guides have become the go-to resource for data salaries around the world. If you'd like to download our full guide, we have included a link in the comments. But I'm also really pleased to announce that this year, for the first time ever, we've created an interactive website where you can compare our salary to the industry, or your salary rather, to the industry standard. In today's session, we'll be covering some of our key findings and overarching trends uncovered in this year's report. We'll also be answering any questions you may have about the current state of the UK data market. So if you do have any questions, feel free to pop them in the comment section and we'll address them throughout the conversation. But before we get started, let's do a couple of quick introductions. So to start off, my name is Kirsty Garshong. I am the UK Associate Director for the Contracts Function. India.
Thank you, Kirsty. So my name is India. I lead our marketing and insights function at Harnham. I'm a senior manager here and I've been here for 6 years now working on permanent recruitment.
Lovely. Thanks, India. Jamie?
Thanks, Kirsty. My name is Jamie. I've been at Harnham for about 6 years now as well. I lead our northern function. So we recruit across all areas of data and analytics, but specifically within the North and Midlands.
Lovely. Thank you, Jamie. And last but not least, Waseem.
Thanks, Kirsty. Really excited to be part of the panel today. It's taken you 12 years to invite me, so I won't take offence to that. But I'm Waseem Ali. I'm the CEO at Rockborne. I've got a career of about 15 odd years in data and all aspects for it. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. So let's get into it. We're going to kick things off with our first overarching trend this year, which is stability through uncertainty. So this year's survey data reveals that through economic uncertainty, the UK's data industry has remained relatively stable. So with 83% of data professionals feeling as or more secure in their roles compared to last year. Of course, that's not to say that the sector hadn't felt an impact on the global economic landscape. Obviously, in late last year and early 2023, companies were tightening their belts. And I think we've all experienced that. And that put a hold on hiring and relocating resources. But despite this, data wages have still seen a modest increase of 13%. One field in particular that has been, I think, what's seen one of the highest pay increases is marketing and insight. So, Indy, can you share some insights into what you're seeing in this space?
Definitely. Thank you, Kirsty. So my team's in marketing insights actually really broad. So we would cover customer analytics, marketing analytics, CRM, data strategy, research, and product. And across all of these areas, we've seen a rise year on year. I think something to note is that we've seen graduates achieve starting salaries well above the £30,000 a year mark, and sometimes even into £40,000 a year. Product managers are the highest paying roles. So since my 6 years here, I've seen app companies hiring in the product ideation space, and it's now a very well paid market. It's also a very competitive one, and it actually now beats traditional insight and analytics too.
So India, if you don't mind, I'll just chime in a little bit from what I'm actually hearing from the market. So from the customers that we speak to data and digital leaders in the market, a lot of companies at the moment are striving to be product and research led, and we know whenever organizations are going through a data or digital transformation, data is at the heart of it. So if I was a betting person, if I was to look forwards to the future salary surveys, I will guess that these roles will grow even more so in the next few years.
Yeah, definitely, Waseem, and it's definitely something that clients are asking us more and more to help them out with, both the products and the research side too. I think another interesting fact that's come out of this year's guide is that while marketing and insight roles have seen one of the highest wage increases, I think it's worth noting that this 14% increase fails to meet expectations, with professionals in the space actually seeking a 20% pay rise on average. We definitely saw lots of inflated expectations last year, and those are actually achieved in 2021, 2022 as well. I mean, my teams, we were seeing candidates get £20,000 pay increases when getting new roles. We also then saw counter offers compete with that too, and this sort of further increase in inflated salaries. I think this year clients, through everything sort of going on in the world of, companies, etc., have just had to tighten their belts a little bit, and they're now much more realistic, and they're having to benchmark against other team members, and so we're just seeing that reflected within the pay increases too, and that even though expectations from candidates, however, are still quite high, with cost of living being cited regularly as a reason for them to seek a higher base salary, they're actually not quite reaching them at the moment.
Thank you, India. Jamie, can you share some insights on the North and what you're seeing in terms of pay rises outside London?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, it's probably very similar to what India said there. I think, cost of living affects everyone, doesn't matter where you live. And I think mortgage interest rates, etc., that's a big driver for people to achieve a higher salary ultimately. As seen in the guide, though, I think, you'll probably find that there's only marginal differences nowadays between base salaries outside of London, in the North and the Midlands, which I think is really interesting. I think if you look back to maybe 2020, 2021, there was maybe a 10, 15% gap. Now it's maybe down to 5 to 7% across some areas, which is really interesting to see. The last couple of years has seen companies in the Midlands and the North competing with, London-based companies like your tech startups offering remote first contracts, and typically they've not been able to keep up pace, but they've had to secure the right talent over the last couple of years. So to sort of, get those local candidates, they're basically having to offer more attractive base salaries, right? Because they're competing against those remote first companies. So we've seen that increase dramatically over the last couple of years. I think one really interesting thing we've seen more in the last 6-8 months is the demand for more senior candidates. So more of your head of BIs, your head of data engineers, your senior managers. And I think that's mainly because companies in northern hubs, if you like, they're looking to build out local teams now. And obviously they need a senior to really guide that hiring strategy, which is interesting. Certainly echo your thoughts there on product management, India. Probably more so on the back end side, I'd say. I mean, we've done a big project recently with an automotive company, and I know they're looking for product professionals and, still all that product management experience for all intents and purposes with the road mapping and the vision. But they really want people now who can work in agile, understand architectural and data engineering principles, right, to build data products. So that's been a real shift. And then finally, it's definitely worth noting that data engineering, we're seeing people with 2 years of, Python, maybe some like orchestration or streaming experience getting over 60K, which is, pretty unprecedented. So I think that'll remain over the next couple of years, to be honest with you, particularly in data engineering, but that's certainly been an interesting trend.
Thank you, Jamie. And I think this leads us to our second trend, which is return to office, or at least partly. So our research has found that, like last year, the majority of employees work on a hybrid basis, with the average data professional spending 1.5 days in the office per week. And while flexibility has become the new normal for us, and most employers are happy to accommodate this, many organisations are now establishing formalised agreements with their employees to ensure that people are committed to a specific number of days in the office. In fact, this year has seen a significant influx of formalised agreements. So with 37% of employees claiming they have a remote or hybrid working agreement explicitly outlined in their contract, compared to just 15% who did last year. I think that probably speaks to maybe candidates and companies playing catch up in that paperwork it doesn't necessarily always reflect exactly what's going on. And so we might be seeing an increase because of that. But I would definitely expect that figure to grow in the coming years. But perhaps unsurprisingly, fully remote work is slightly more popular up north compared to London, with 42% of northern respondents working fully remotely. In London, 36% of respondents work completely remote. So Jamie, can you share some insights on what's happening in the north of the UK?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that stat definitely makes sense. I think because of COVID and the pandemic, more people have moved out of larger cities, right? Because they can access roles now that are 1 day a week in the office, right? So if you were in zone 2 or 3 in London, you can probably now go and live in, another city or another town outside of London, right? And still keep your job, basically. So we've seen a lot of that. It could also be people are needing more formalized contracts. As you mentioned, I think Kirsty, 37% was it, have a formal agreement. And I think because, working from home for some businesses is a new thing over the last couple of years, companies are certainly playing catch up. And I think now companies are actually going back into the office as well. It means that more candidates want that security of it being written into contracts. But what you alluded to with the North, it's certainly a case of candidates, moving into different towns, cities. We work with a lot of candidates who maybe live over in Yorkshire, will commute over to Manchester 1 day a week as well. So it certainly makes sense why that's more prevalent outside of London, pretty much. But yeah, with employees attending the office more frequently, there could be a couple of factors to that as well, like a fall in productivity levels. I've spoken to some companies who are starting to enforce that because of a lack of productivity. But you need to find a balance with that, and also the natural attrition you're going to face and have once you do start getting people to come back to the office. So it is a very difficult balance to find, but it's certainly more prevalent outside of London by the looks of it. One thing I also find as well, we talk a lot around remote work, but a lot of candidates want to go into the office now. I think that's certainly changed over the last few months, particularly if you're, working in maybe front-end data visualization or analytics. A lot of your key stakeholders, you're going to need to meet in person to really bridge those gaps and build those relationships right across different business areas. I know Waseem at Rockborne, obviously, that's a big focus, particularly in the early careers development and really working on those soft skills as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Jamie. And look, I agree on the points that you've kind of raised there around the trends and what organisations are doing. I mean, you're seeing it all over the news at the moment as well, aren't you, in terms of organisations returning people back to the office and how that's working and so on. So look, for Rockborne, in terms of context, we effectively run a data graduate scheme that takes a diverse range of individuals and takes them through a 13-week data training program. That involves us running a huge number of technical skills in terms of training that you would expect for people fairly early in their career. But one of our main focuses is also the softer skills and bits around some of the softer skills as well. In fact, I'm calling it soft skills, but I was reading an article this morning by an individual called Seth Godin, who says actually soft skills should be renamed as real skills because that's how important they are in the workplace. If possible, we'll share a link to that article towards the end of this talk as well. But why is that so important for us? Because actually there's a lot of research done in the field around the communication skills and the real skills that you need to work, and the difference between doing it in person and learning it in person versus doing it online. And in data, certainly in the teams that I've built in the past and the teams that we're building at the moment, it's absolutely crucial. And we know because of COVID, because of kind of the lockdown, universities were in lockdown, everything was being done online. And I think to an extent, people learnt to mingle and socialize online, which has its kind of pros and cons as well. But it's so important with the trend that we're seeing, that especially if you're early careers, you get to do it in person as well. Hence our training does actually cover both online communication training as well as in person as well. And there is a mindset shift in this with organisations as well. So for me, I think return to the office is beneficial, especially for those that are starting in their career. There's always a bit of flexible working, so a little bit of home working and so on. But especially if you're early in your career, it does allow for opportunities for them to gain these key skills as well. So that's certainly from an early careers perspective.
Thank you, Waseem. And I think clearly there are some benefits, obviously, to being on site, at least partly. I think on in the contract space, things are a little bit different. So we've seen that 72% of contractors actually work fully remote. There is a potential caveat here, and I'd be really interested to know how many respondents actually responded fully remote, but actually still go into the office from time to time, whether it be for meetings or huddles or even to pick up IT equipment, right? So I think regardless, across both permanent and contract, remote working is still the number one most appreciated and desired benefit, which I think we'll touch on a little bit later. However, I guess lack of remote roles don't appear to be driving people out of roles in the first place, and it doesn't seem to be the main driving factor as to why people would leave. In fact, less than 1% of people cited lack of remote working options as a reason for leaving their last role. So I think we'll obviously touch on what's causing people to want to go into roles, but it doesn't seem to be that that's actually driving people out of positions. I think,
Kirsty, I was just going to say, just on the point of softer skills, we have actually had a question come through. So I wonder if I can open it up to the panel, really. So Harj, thank you for your question, Harj. Harj is seeing a lot more requirements for more technical data skills, even in the insight focus role. So this was on our first topic of conversation. So seeing a lot more requirements for technical data skills, even in the insight focus roles. Is this a common theme you're seeing? In fact, we are going to be talking about this in a bit, isn't it? In terms of how more skills are required. India, this is completely your kind of wheelhouse. Are you seeing this in requirements from clients?
Yeah, perfect. So thank you very much for the question, Harj. So like Waseem said, we do discuss this later. The main, well, I have to give you a snippet now because we've said that, but the main skills that do come up are Excel, as well as SQL, Python. But I think generally, to be honest, even in insights focused role, when they're focusing on big data, the need to understand how to manipulate the data, the need for coding, the need to like deep dive into these data sets to then draw out the insights, to then do the storytelling piece, it's kind of always been important, but yeah, it is becoming more and more important. Like I would recommend that for any insight role, somebody would need to upskill themselves, like in coding, make sure you're an Excel whiz, like VLOOKUPs, macros, all these kind of things. It's just going to come in handy, even those positions that do focus more on the storytelling and insights. I hope that answers it.
Thank you, India. Yeah, and look, I've been long in the tooth in data. So when I first started, there weren't so many different types of roles in data. You were a data analyst that covered everything. And I think we are seeing a bit of a trend around some organizations, especially coming back to that way of having a few more technical skill sets in there. But again, really, really important, as we just discussed, around having some of those kind of softer real skills as well. Sorry, Kirsty.
No worries. Thank you for the question. I'd like to move on to our next topic, which is what are the main reasons for people leaving their roles and what are the top benefits attracting candidates? So in terms of our responses and the results, they are quite consistent with last year. So the top 5 reasons for leaving a role were, in first place, we have salary/rates not being competitive. In second place, we have lack of progression. In third place, for a better opportunity. And fourth place, poor management, which is quite interesting. And then fifth, poor company culture. So I think personally, from a contract side, lack of progression isn't always something we see as relevant, but pay certainly is. So this is particularly important when it comes to IR35 determinations, as usually that will impact contractors' take-home pay. So with 59.4% of our respondents expecting to see an increase in daily rate for the contracts that are inside IR35, it's definitely a driving factor. And 22% of those contractors receiving a day rate increase. Pay is obviously a dominating factor for contractors. But when looking at movement for a better opportunity, I would say that really isn't surprising at all for the contract market. What we've seen over the last year is the economic uncertainty has driven a lot of businesses to lean to contractor resource to accelerate projects where they've had things like hiring freezes, etc. And that therefore has led to quite a lot of interesting different projects being available on the market. And so one insight that I think would be good to depart on you is that clients that fail to correctly scope out deliverables do run the risk of losing access to the correct subject matter experts if something else potentially comes along. So definitely worth noting that. But it is surprising to see that a lack of flexibility isn't a feature here, particularly when it comes to outside IR35 contractors. There is a requirement to demonstrate usually qualities that don't really resemble an employment relationship to maintain that tax status. And so I think that's pretty surprising from my side. Waseem, what's your perspective here?
So I'll probably look at the bottom two in the top ranking in terms of kind of culture and management, and I think from my perspective, it's extremely important for organizations to understand the drivers for employees and individuals outside of the usual salary, bonus and benefits. That's not me saying they're not important. Absolutely, they're important, especially in a time of kind of economic uncertainty and so on. But employees outside of that are also looking for management that they can turn to for guidance and advice. They want to feel inspired by individuals and feel supported by those individuals at the same time as well. And I mean, think for anyone listening today, think about the role that you've absolutely loved the most. I think most of the time you'll think about the people that you worked with and the management that you had and how they were inspired, as opposed to your paycheck at the end. Again, I'm not detracting away from the importance of that, but that's what makes an individual feel good in terms of that. And we do talk about this a lot in organizations. We talk about it a lot across the Harnham group as well. And I do think that organizations and managers in organizations need to find a way of measuring the effectiveness of this, which is really hard to do. I mean, look, some of the things by no means is this the playbook for this, but some of the things that I've done in the past is get anonymous feedback from the team. Reverse mentoring has been extremely effective for me personally as a manager and a leader, from the perspective of and for context, reverse mentoring is effectively getting mentored by someone who is perhaps slightly lower down from you in the so-called hierarchy, and understanding their perspective on how you're perceived. So just things that I'd be standing in a team meeting and talking about certain elements, and in my head I come across in a particular way. My direct reports are telling me I come across in a particular way, but actually I'm not being perceived in that way. That's so important for leaders to do. So that's one thing that's worked really effectively for me, Kirsty.
I think that's a great point, Waseem, when thinking about diversity of thought and inclusion initiatives, and making sure that actually you're taking feedback from the team to make sure that you are actually being inclusive. I think it's worth noting that obviously we do have a separate diversity inclusion survey, which will come out later on this year. But I think we know from the research that we have done that things like diversity of thought links quite a bit to retention within teams. India, are there any insights that you can share?
Yeah, of course. I mean, firstly, like Waseem and Kirsty, totally agree with you on those points. Like the candidates we're speaking to day in, day out regularly say that having a good manager, an inspiring manager, somebody they see as a leader and, being part of a good culture is definitely something that they want to, a reason as to why they want to stay in their current role, or something they do want to replicate if they are looking for something new. I think when clients are doing lots of hiring and it's sort of, all guns blazing on it, and they really focus on improving interview processes and all this kind of thing, that actually retention of top talent can be missed, and that this year especially, if some businesses are actually not hiring as much as they would like to, then focusing on not losing their top talent should definitely be a priority. There's a statistic I read in the guide around saying that 71% of candidates surveyed said they would leave their roles if something better came up, despite not being actively looking. And I would say that that's definitely reflective of what my team are seeing day in, day out. I think this is why retention strategies are so important for clients to develop. to really focus on retaining those people who could clearly quite easily be intrigued and swayed to interview and go elsewhere. I think we're often working with passive candidates who weren't particularly looking for something new. They're quite comfortable, but then actually when they are presented with an opportunity or presented with a new challenge, they can actually be really keen to interview and even go all the way and accept an offer and move on. I was wondering if you're finding similar situations with the Northern team, Jamie?
Yeah, certainly. I think one that I'm not surprised about, because it's in here most years, but maybe thought it would be higher, to be fair, about a poor company culture. I think we're seeing more candidates maybe cite like differences within the workforce on going back to the office. And I know I touched on remote versus office before, so I don't want to dwell on that. But I feel that when people talk about culture, they talk about office environment, they talk about collaboration. And if you've got half of your team remote and half, with an appetite to come into the office, that can create a fracture. So I think many candidates cite that as being a real reason and motivator for looking to move. And I think we'll probably see more of that over the next couple of years, or particularly months, as people look to go back to the office. I'd say also, what I'd recommend and advise clients and companies to think about is, why are you bringing people back into the office? Is it a case of, getting bums on seats, as it were, or is it a case where you need those people to come back in to actually collaborate with someone in the product team, right? Because they come in on a Tuesday, or are they coming in for a workshop on a certain day, to really increase that presence within the office and that collaboration and enhance that culture. I think another thing as well that companies need to think about more closely is, can they really maximize their cognitive diversity within the team and start thinking about cultural add instead of just cultural fit? I know personally at Harnham, we've really implemented that when we're looking to hire. And I think people need to really think about, right, what's this person adding? Are they adding something different? And are they going to change our culture? Or are they going to remain a constant and just fit into our culture? I definitely recommend going for the former.
And you know what? Just on that point, Jamie, actually, you're 100% right. Sorry, Waseem, when thinking about, why people are bringing people back into the office, because I think when we're to your second point in terms of cognitive diversity, some people do actually work better in slightly more isolated environments. And so working from home actually potentially could lead to being more productive. So definitely worth looking at with specific individuals and asking about what's going to make them most productive. And even
really
it's such an interesting topic, isn't it? Like, I think we could do an entire kind of panel show on just this. I think we've all bring a different perspective to it as well, which is the beauty of diversity in the first place, right? So it's a great point. We've had another question. So Nida, I hope I've said your name correctly. Thank you for your question. So you spoke about the importance of softer skills being important, but with the levels of competition and massive interest in each role, how does one make sure that their CV or cover letter covers this aspect of it? This is a really interesting one. So Jamie, I've obviously got a view because I train people on it, but what's your take from the CV cover letter side?
Yeah. Well, no need to do a cover letter because we'll do that for you. Just plug in Harnham. But no, in terms of a CV, I think it's really important to actually talk about value add. So it's all very well having this key skills section at the top or the bottom of your CV, right, where you talk about Python, SQL, Tableau, Power BI, whatever it might be. You need to be weaving that within the body of your CV and talking about, right, I built a self-service dashboard within Tableau and this was the impact of it. Or, when you're liaising with the wider business, you actually worked with the head of sales or the head of finance to identify what KPIs are important to them, built a data model off the back of that, and this was the impact. So it is talking about value add, it's talking about impact, it's talking about quantifiable numbers. So what was the ROI on that? Or, we saved X amount of money with this particular project. So what did you do to impact the business? And I think, I know we did a white paper on this Waseem at the start of this year in terms of quantifying the benefits of data. And it is really hard to do, particularly on an individual level, but try and really emphasize what your impact was, right? That's the key theme. And I think that's where most people fall down. And when I speak to clients, the reason they reject many CVs is just because it's 5 pages and 2 pages of it are bullet points about every single tech they've used in the last 10 years, when it needs to be, what have you done recently and what's the value add been and the impact of it? So just have a think about that.
I can add.
Go on,
I was
India.
going to add something on that actually, that sometimes you can also include things where I think you go maybe above and beyond in your job, or do things that aren't always necessarily within your job description, whether that be, being part of DE&I committees, whether it's some mentoring you took on that's, for somebody outside of your team, whether it's, hobbies and I've had somebody before who's professional, like power lifter, right? Which is amazing. It's such an interesting thing that somebody has that's a massive part of them outside of work. And I think you don't want to maybe put all of that right at the top, but definitely including something that really helps your personality and your hobbies and like who you are outside of work come through. It's still important to add in, and will be a good discussion as well at interview.
Brilliant, thank you, Jamie and India. And I hope that's answered your question. So thank you for asking.
Thanks, guys. So let's dive into the top benefits that people that are attracting talent across the industry. So this year, in first place, we have remote working, which is probably doesn't come as a surprise to anybody. Second place, we have bonus. Third place, we have health insurance. In fourth place, we have flexible working. And in fifth place, we have enhanced pensions. So a newcomer to that list, which is quite interesting for me to see, is health insurance. India, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, so I think it's clearly new because of the pandemic over the past couple of years, but actually I think the general sort of theme of wellness that we are discussing with people day in, day out is also reflected in that. So, we are often speaking to candidates who actually really want to prioritise their lives outside of work. They might want to work part-time 4 days a week, spend more time with their families. We're seeing lots of, work abroad and working remotely too. And this is something that's becoming a question that we're being asked more than more, but also it's a reality that clients are having to offer. That being said, that actually doesn't mean that we're increasingly having to commonly check this with employers to see what is allowed with regards to data access from different countries, as well as making sure that workers are tax compliant too. Is there anything on the list that perhaps anyone is surprised not to see?
I'd probably go with maternity and paternity leave. I feel that I speak to a lot of both men and women who have questioned that, and it's not been super evident on the benefits brochure, for example. We work with a lot of clients who may not even have a benefits brochure and leave all their benefits into a contract. And then you get to the end of a process where a candidate's, verbally accepted. They read the contract and it's not, adequate to what they're looking for, right? So it's really important that I suppose companies think about that and make sure that, their benefits brochure's accessible, but it actually details things like maternity and paternity leave on there. It's really important. I'd probably say the reason it might not be on there, to be fair, is because the prominence of things like flexible working. Maybe because of that, that's helped people with, young children and newborns accommodate for that, if that makes sense. I think management also need to lead by example on this as well, right? If they have a young family, obviously Waseem, right? I know you've got a young boy. I've definitely seen him on a couple of calls that you've been on as well.
Yeah, look, I'm completely with you on that. So I do think kind of culturally, once an individual has joined an organisation, I do think it's the responsibility of management, in my view, to lead by example. And that's something that I try to practice in whatever organisation I've been to, and it sets the tone for the people in your team and the organisation as well. And without doubt, I think the kind of sharpest tool in an employer's box is actually the leading by example. And nothing will drive the point home more than actually just kind of practicing what you preach in a way on that side as well. So look, I'm the CEO of an organization. I sometimes make a point to, for example, I may have 15 minutes spare where I'll FaceTime with my little boy. I don't get to see him a huge amount when I'm at work and in the office 4 days a week or so on. So I make a point to FaceTime with him, and I'm unapologetic about that. I obviously am respectful for everyone in the office and I don't disturb. I do step aside, but I do make a point of doing that because it's important to me, and that's kind of part of the values that I'm trying to live and breathe. I mean, look, recently I've had to bring my son into a board meeting that we had, and I informed everyone in the board that for various reasons I had to bring him onto the call. I was unapologetic about it, so I wasn't sorry about it. I wouldn't do it every single time, just to be really clear, because I want to hone in the point of flexibility is two ways, right? So I wouldn't do it every single time, but I needed to do it, and everyone was nothing but understanding on that. And I mean, he's super cute, so why wouldn't you want him on a meeting anyway? So, but that's my bias coming into play there. So that was the flexibility that I requested, and that's what I got. So it's really, really important, and I do want to hone in the point around it is important. Communication is really, really important in that kind of flexibility, and employers have a responsibility to listen to their employees in supporting them in their kind of flexible working requirements, but the communication has to be two ways and kind of an adult to adult conversation, really, if that makes sense.
Definitely. And I think this is really important when we're looking into drivers and having a good team culture where parents and carers as well are embraced is a really good sign of inclusivity. I think this is obviously by no means conclusive, right? But I'm really confident that when thinking about inclusivity, it does circle back to retention. When we do look at contractor benefits, I can't really say that it's something that we often talk about, as it is a well-known fact that day rates will compensate for the lack of benefits. But what is overwhelming is, we discussed this a little bit earlier, is the need obviously for remote working. So obviously with the combination of the cost of living, forced isolation of COVID, I think Jamie touched on this earlier, a lot of people have had to move away or chosen to move away from cities. And so therefore, if they do need to necessarily go back into the office, there needs to be a reason for that. And I think the stats obviously support that. So most professionals will spend about, on average, 1.5 days in the office. And those two obviously go hand in hand. I think it's worth us moving into the fourth section. Let's, I think, switch gears a little bit onto a new topic. So this particular topic has been making waves in the media with ChatGPT. It's on everyone's radar. And I think a lot of you would have already guessed it. We're talking about AI. So nearly half of the respondents believe that AI and machine learning is going to have the biggest impact on the data industry this year. At Harnham, we're seeing quite a lot of our clients put a real focus on AI. Even companies in the early stages of their AI journey are integrating AI into broader data strategies, which is encouraging to see. I'm seeing a lot more companies in the early stages of their processes as well, when it comes to AI. So maybe sandboxing rather than in production, but it's definitely something that we're seeing a lot more of. I know one of the heated debates around AI is whether it's taking away jobs or creating those. And I'd say there's obviously an argument for both, right? There is definitely a lot of job creation that stands to take place over the coming years as companies really look to invest in AI and take advantage of that. However, a big part of AI is automation. And so there are jobs that will likely be removed as a result of AI's expansion. Waseem, as a data person, what's your perspective on this rapid innovation within the AI space? And I guess, is there anything we need to be aware of as we enter into this new era of tech disruption?
Thanks, Kirsty. I mean, look, this is a topic I can talk about for hours on end, and that's what we're going to do. No, we're not. But it could be a new topic. But we just had a question actually come through on this. So before I go into my perspective, we've had a question through from Prosper, and she or they are asking, how is automation and AI, especially Gen AI, on that topic, impacting hiring and salaries? And recently we have seen a lot of leaning in from the big tech. Great question. Thank you, Prosper. And I think Kirsty's covered some of that in her answer as well. But I think that the skills that are required is what we're seeing personally change, and what I'm hearing from the clients, and do jump in any of the panel on this as well. But the skills required in order for you to be someone who can use generative AI or build models using machine learning or any of that's the skills that we're seeing changing. And I think clearly from the results of the salary survey, individuals are thinking that's going to be the big driver in change over the next few years for data professionals altogether as well. I mean, just look, hopefully that kind of somewhat answers your question anyway. anyway. But look, on the topic of AI, I think it's first of all, it's worth saying that AI has actually been around for a while, and look, kind of arguably, probably from the 1950s or so, when Alan Turing first kind of published his paper, kind of recalling the name around it was intelligence and something to do with intelligence and computer machinery. So it's not new as a concept, right? It's been around for a while. What's triggered the latest storm and what's kind of the buzz all over the news is ChatGPT, which is a form of AI, as you said, Kirsty. It's generative AI. And for those that are still in the want to be in the know of it, it's essentially a system that can generate words, text, images based on certain prompts that users put in. Now, AI in general, including generative AI, I think will be a game changer for organizations. As I said, that's what the salary survey is telling us. The majority feel it will affect the data industry, which is bang on, absolutely correct. But I think it's actually wider. I think it will affect organizations and businesses altogether as well. And I think what organizations need to spend the time doing is really, really understanding the outcome that they're wanting from it. Not just saying that they want generative AI or AI because it's a thing in the news and everyone should have it, but actually have an understanding on the outcome that it can bring to their business and the benefits it can bring to the business as well. So again, I can talk about this for a really long time. So look, in my view, over the next kind of couple of years, I think businesses need to create environments to allow experimentation of all forms of data science, AI, and machine learning. In regulated environments, I should definitely add, they need to properly assess and test the impact of these before deploying any models into a production or a real-time type environment. For me, there's three key aspects. There's the people aspect, there's the regulation aspect, and there's the technology aspect to this. So again, coming back to Prosper's question a little bit around the lean from big tech there as well. No, there's a point. I've put it in order of people, reg, and tech. That I've done this intentionally, right? Because it should be seen in that kind of order. So people come first for me, and it always has in any sort of data project that I've done. The people aspect always comes first. Now, there's a fear around the industry, around individuals losing their jobs as a result of AI. Sorry to be the slightly older person on this call, but that fear has been around for years, right? With any advancements of new technology, going back years and years when it came to automation of machinery, when it came to farming, it's been around for ages. Now, the optimist in me says, whereas the fear isn't unreasonable, but it's also and there is some truth in it, but the optimist in me is saying that it's an opportunity for people to learn and develop new skills. We've seen it previously in whenever new tech comes out. It's going to be the same thing with AI as it expands as well. The next point is regulation. So with innovation comes regulation. Right, innovation usually works and goes a lot faster than the regulation. The regulation catches up, but AI is going to be underpinned by data, and that data will be commercially sensitive. It will be confidential. It will even be personal. And without regulation, AI will become dangerous. So I know lots of different countries are taking different approaches. UK are hosting different panels. They've got a more kind of tailored approach. And there's no right or wrong answer to this. Well, actually, there's plenty of wrong answers, so maybe I'll take that back. But actually, what's really, really important is that you need to bring the right people around the table to understand how to best provide those guide rails for businesses in order to use AI more effectively. Kirsty, I bet you regret passing that over to me because there can be a new topic on this altogether.
No, Waseem, I think you're 100% right, and I think some of that we're already seeing come through is the regulation piece, particularly. And then there's in the UK, particularly, there has been some laws that have been passed around AI. I'm not up to date in terms of the specifics, but naturally that causes a lot of speculation within organisations to understand actually how those regulations impact them. And so we're definitely going to see, I think, more of that come through across industries within the data space. But thank you, Waseem, for going into that. So let's switch gears a bit and move into our final topic, which is what is the most popular technology used across the data space? So there are 5 top technologies. In the first space, we have SQL in terms of the programming language. Second place, Python. Third place, Excel. In fourth place, Power BI, and in fifth place, Tableau. So the newcomers here that weren't there last year are Excel and Power BI. I think from my personal perspective, there's no surprise that there's a combination of programming languages here and visualization tools. We saw this last year in that a lot of businesses were interested in seeing hybrid candidates that had a combination of programming skills where they could wrangle the data, but then also be able to visualize it and speak to data professionals and I guess non-technical professionals. And I think this correlates to some of the insights we've obviously seen on the contract side. So with businesses tightening their belts and having to be more cautious in terms of their approach to hiring, we have seen obviously a continuation of that hybrid candidate requirement to be able to justify cost. So candidates aren't just being expected to come in and develop a dashboard nowadays. They're also being able to expected to do the data wrangling, which I mentioned, speak to the stakeholders, and then also maybe run some workshops to modify those dashboards. And so that will require a combination of those skills. I think what's interesting for me to see is that there are no cloud platforms here, but one to watch. And I think probably something that we might want to keep an eye out for the future, really.
Just on the point of actually cloud platforms, we've had a question come in through Dushyant. So thank you for your question, Dushyant. And they're asking if AWS is more preferred over Azure or Google. I've certainly got an opinion and experienced it a little bit. So Jamie, I know you're in this space a little bit in terms of recruitment. What's your take?
Yeah, it's a common question we get from candidates looking to maybe go and do a data camp or some sort of Coursera to get exposure to it. I'd be keen to get your opinion as well, Waseem, right? But particularly, we see a lot of companies migrating over to GCP over the last couple of years. Some big telcos, a lot of big banks are moving over to GCP. AWS is definitely still more common. If you were to look at the number of people who use AWS as their predominant platform, it's still AWS. So I'd probably rank AWS top, GCP second, Azure third. But GCP, I would not be surprised it may overtake it relatively soon. I find that companies who do a lot of machine learning and data science have a tendency to gravitate towards GCP over AWS. Again, the context behind that, I'm not too sure, but Waseem, you might have a little bit more of an idea as to why that might be.
There's so many different factors to why an organization will pick a particular cloud provider. If I'm to be honest, I think they're all very, very similar. I might open up a huge debate in the comment section here, but they're all very, very similar, different usabilities. Cost is always a big factor in all of these things. We can't hide behind it. And actually also the different levels of security that are available in the different environments that are available for organizations to use them and stuff as well. So I think there's a few different factors on platforms as well. I think what's really interesting and is also the general direction these platforms are going in as well. So I think there's definitely one to watch out for sure. Kirsty, what I did want to do is I wanted to touch on one of your points when you spoke about kind of the hybrid candidates needing more skills, and it was a question earlier that we had as well, didn't we, around those skill sets and I do find what organizations are looking for, and it's kind of what I mentioned earlier is kind of more end-to-end skills without kind of saying that you need absolutely everything. And that is from understanding the collection process and data to the curation process and data to actually consuming that data as well. So I think more and more organizations that I'm talking to are wanting those kind of rounded skill sets as well. And look, that's great for an organization like Rockborne, because we're having these conversations and we're looking at data like this. We're able to mold our curriculum in order to fit that bracket as well. And it's great to see some of the tech that's come out on here, because those key technology platforms that were mentioned and did rank in the top 5 are things that we teach at Rockborne to our consultants, but also what a lot of our clients are asking for in terms of training as well.
I think that training you're running sounds great, Waseem. I know it's had such good industry feedback as well. So I think that's really excellent. If we go back to the list, I think one thing that I've actually seen in there every single year that this year has missed out on is SaaS. I think this is obviously reflexive, right, of like how fast moving the data market is. But when I joined, SaaS was like an important, if not essential, tool for every single role that we worked on for a really long time. So the fact that it's totally dropped off, like the top 5 tools this year is really interesting for sure. I think we've had an extra question come through. The question is from Carmen. Are there any up and coming tools that you expect to be in the ranking next year? I'll open it out.
I can take some of that. So I think 2 tools that I don't think they're in there. No. So DBT and Looker are 2 big things that I think would definitely be in there soon, right? We see a lot of call for analytics engineers. So, companies are seeking people with data transformation experience, basically. And then obviously you build reports on top of that clean data layer that's been built in Looker. So I think it's only a matter of time, particularly DBT. I think that tool's only been out 3 or 4 years. Do correct me if that's not the case, but it's relatively new. So therefore, not as many people have it. There's Fivetran that does a similar thing, but I do think DBT specifically is going to create a bit of a buzz, well, it already has, but more of a buzz in the industry, and more so Looker as well. I think Tableau and Power BI are on there, right? But I think it's only a matter of time maybe before Looker features. But it would be interesting to see.
Definitely. I guess
there is a point on that. Oh, sorry, Kirsty. There is actually a bit of a point on that, isn't there? Because related to the earlier question, if you think about some of those tools and technologies that you're talking about, I mean, a lot of them are part of the bigger players that we were talking about in terms of AWS and Google. Google acquired Looker. That's becoming their platform offering. That's the trend that we're starting to see. Microsoft have got Power BI. Salesforce are acquired Tableau and have this end-to-end offering. That's the direction organizations tech organizations are going in. They're trying to create that dominance almost of organizations that if you have, I don't know, Microsoft, you are going to have Power BI, you are going to have Azure, you are going to have all of this, likewise with Google, likewise with so on. So I definitely see some of those platforms coming up there and more acquisitions happening actually on that side.
For sure. Kirsty, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think this is less of a technology that we're seeing up and coming, but more of a requirement in terms of skills. So I think Waseem, you'll probably be able to comment on this, but we're definitely seeing a lot more. We were speaking earlier about hybrid analysts that can maybe wrangle the data and visualize it, but we are definitely also seeing a lot more hybrids within maybe things like development and operations. So you're seeing obviously the emergence of DevOps roles within cloud platforms, or even data engineering candidates that can also do a little bit of the infrastructure work. So I would say less relates to specific technologies, but more so to, I think, the demands of these types of hybrid and merging within different areas, which we would have previously categorized in more of like subcontexts, shall we say?
Yeah, look, absolutely, and it kind of, there's a theme, right? And it's great because we're telling a bit of a data story with sorry, the data nerd comes out in me, right? But we're telling a data story with the data that we have from the survey, because actually the theme is around, we were talking about how product roles being more agile is becoming more frequently asked for in organizations, but actually, if you are a product-led organization, you are probably deploying code onto your platforms and products on a more regular basis. In order to do that, you need to have continuous integration, continuous deployment, which is all around DevOps and CI/CD. So we're seeing patterns come up in the data, which I think is personally really, really, really fascinating. We have had a question come through as well around, I think a couple of people have asked this. So thank you to the 2 people that have asked this. I don't actually have the names, but they've asked about kind of R and Google Analytics and our thoughts on that as well. So Jamie, I know you kind of recruit for a number of roles on this. So do you want to cover that perhaps?
Yeah, for sure. So many people within the digital and web analytics space will know that there's been a huge GA4 migration recently. So that migration was completed, I believe, on the 1st of July, so 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think the reason GA is not featured on the top 5 is because of that migration. It was almost like companies had an option to maybe opt out and maybe go to the Adobe stack, for example, right? So I'd be really keen to see how that pans out over the next 12, 24 months to go, right, has Adobe eaten up a market share as a web analytics platform over GA? As I know, GA4 specifically did have its difficulties when it came to implementation and tag management and stuff like that. So there's been a few pain points with it, from what I understand. So maybe some companies have opted to go for Adobe. I think Waseem, your other question was R. So again, this is more India's space, but having recruited into that market as well, I know R tends to be used more so at university, right? If you do a statistics or a mathematics degree, there'll be a module on stats, and R's used at unis, right? So we see a lot of candidates coming out of STEM degree backgrounds who have R, and then transition into maybe more of an insight analytics role. We'll still do some regression modeling in R, but again, India, correct me if I'm wrong, I think more and more companies are now looking for Python over R when it comes to doing predictive analytics. So it's not died or it's not dying, but it's being overtaken somewhat by Python.
Yeah, I think still on job specs, you would see like Python stroke R, for example, but it just seems that Python's just tended to be the preferred for everyone. And I think that's why it's almost just gone ahead and now been the main requirement. But both still, I think, are, if you have one or the other, my understanding is that it might not be too difficult to pick up the other one, basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thanks, guys. Well, I think that's all we've got time for today. Thank you so much, Waseem, for joining us. I hope we haven't scared you off, and next year you join again. And thank you, India and Jamie, for all of your insights. We've obviously discussed quite a lot here, but thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And just to remind you that obviously we do have a new completely separate site this year. So please do take a look at that. That gives you an opportunity to obviously compare your current salary, etc. But we also are launching the US salary guide on Tuesday and July the 25th. So keep an eye out for that. It will be all over LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to any of us on LinkedIn if you do have any further questions or want to follow up. And, of course, if you need any help hiring graduates, experienced staff or contractors, then please do not hesitate to reach out. We would love to help out. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, Kirsty.
Thank you.
Thanks.